Don't let your kids watch it!
Time to make the chimney fucking chompers.
Language!
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
Welcome to the Nerdcast with your hosts, Dark Samus 288 and Snakeskin 94. On this episode of the Nerdcast, take a look at one of the most hotly contested topics in nerd culture, Marvel vs. DC.
Hey, welcome guys to the Nerdcast. I'm your host, John.
I'm Snakeskin.
Yes, and we are here to bring yet another topic of nerd culture. So, you've seen us go through the Star Wars movies, but
Yes.
now let's go to a different part of nerd culture. Now, as you obviously heard in the intro, we're going to be talking one of the most contentious things that can be said in nerd culture.
It's contentious, controversial, personal, electric. Some might even say it's I ran out of adverbs. It's comic stuff. It's comic stuff.
Yep. Marvel versus DC.
Marvel Comics versus Detective Comics. You know, it's a tale as old as time, but like, it's something that didn't really seem to get taken as seriously, and I use that with the fattest of quotation marks, until, of course, the rise of these movies. I can remember very acutely the general opinions of what both companies were, right until the first Avengers movie came out, and everything got flipped on its head. But I guess we'll get to that. Later. Well, my boy's wearing a Spider-Man T-shirt, so you already know where he leans.
Of course, I've always been a Marvel fanboy.
And I feel like sometimes I'm more of a Batman fanboy, just all in all, as opposed to being a DC fanboy. But nah, dude, I'm knee deep in that DC shit. I always tell people this, but some people are like, oh, yo, my comic book collection. My stack of DC and Batman related comics, let's see. You can't really see where my floor is, but it's tall, okay? It's about the size of, if you stacked it all up, it's about the size of a 8 or 9-year-old child. And if that all fell on it, it would probably hurt them. Maybe even kill an infant. I've spent a lot of money on DC.
That reminds me of that one Robot Chicken sketch where it's like, don't sit so close to the TV, Jimmy. You're gonna hurt your eyes, and all of a sudden the TV falls and kills the kid.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, I like DC. And unfortunately, I guess as a way to set the scope, I guess, of this whole thing, there are four opinions about two each for Marvel and DC, and then there's opinions about people that have their opinions. And to break it down, on the Marvel side, either you like all their stuff, and that branches out into, well, you're a normie that doesn't read comics, B, you're a sheep or normie, and 3, yeah, you just like all the movies. Then there's the Marvel camp where it's like, if you're like me and your favorite stuff is like Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man and the Marvel Netflix stuff, or at least most of it, that's kind of its own separate thing. And then with DC, either you like all the DC stuff, and then you're either a contrarian, you're in denial, or you legitimately like all the stuff. And that's just if you like both sides, okay? If you dislike Marvel stuff, then again, that goes back into people perceiving you as being, either a contrarian DC fanboy or not having good taste. But on the flip side, if you dislike DC stuff, you're either seen as a Marvel sheep, someone who doesn't read comics, or, to be fair, DC gets most of the trolls. So, And then there's the minority of people that are just like, look, man, all I want are good comic book movies. If I like some DC stuff, if I like some Marvel stuff, fine, but leave me out y'all's shit posting. That's the minority, because people are so impassioned about these, and I shouldn't roll my eyes because I'm one of them too. People are impassioned about these comic book things.
And I'll say, for a large majority, I do want to see good movies and TV shows and comics from both sides. Because here's the thing. I grew up with DC, and I grew up with Marvel. Here's the thing. I grew up with the OG Justice League Unlimited, the OG Teen Titans, and those kind of shows. I also grew up with the 90s Spider-Man, the 90s X-Men, and that sort of stuff. And here's the thing. I have enjoyed both DC and Marvel at certain points.
Oh yeah, I mean, and not even just as far as DC's fan, as far as a Marvel fanboy's perspective, that's how they see that, and it's kind of weird because the situation we're in is odd. Because as a kid, I remember we're about the same age, we grew up with the same stuff, and it's like you said, as a kid, DC killed it with. You had Batman, the animated series, Batman Beyond, all the Justice League stuff. I even like Static Shock a little bit, but it went kind of beyond that, because DC at the time, the Joel Schumacher Batman movies they were the last taste of Batman in theaters for a while, obviously, until Batman Begins to come out. So movie-wise, DC wasn't the hottest, and they tried to. DC has had TV shows throughout the 70s and 80s. There was obviously the Wonder Woman show with Linda Carter. There was the Shazam show back in the 70s, which is really low budget and really cheesy, but I mean it's kind of charming.
Think about the Captain America show from about the same time period. That was also extremely low budget and kind of shit.
But even going further back, before Adam West Batman, there was two different series of movie serials of Batman, like live action shorts that would air in theaters, and I think those predated the live action Superman ones, where the old Superman stuff. It's the classic thing, the burglar's got the damsel like this. He's got a gun. Superman flies in through the window or something, stands there like this. He's looking magnificent like John Cena, and then the dude shoots him. And then the bullets peel off. He's like, what? And Superman punches him. Those are like the 40s, So DC has had more time to get their stuff out in the general mind of people, and this all has a point. Just follow me on this. Mm-hmm. Marvel had comics for a long time, and they had depending who you ask, Marvel history started with Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four, which eventually led into the Incredible Hulk, which eventually led into Spider-Man, which eventually led into, Jack Kirby making a whole bunch of stuff, but Stan Lee signing his name off it and then taking all the copyrights. But we're not going to talk about that because, people are still sad about Stan Lee. Give it 2 more years. You'll see a whole bunch of exposés on Stan Lee, like the Stan Lee Disney doesn't want you to know about, or the hidden history of Stan Lee. It'll be like a picture of Stan Lee with one of those red circles around his face and an arrow, and it says plagiarist.
You'll also have memes of Stan Lee looking down. Don't make me come down there, you punk.
Or just be like,
here's the thing. One thing I want to say when it comes to Marvel, you know how you've been saying that DC has had a bit more exposure than
they had a jump. They had a jump on the gun, is what I'm saying. Because now, granted, I feel like I know more about Marvel than most DC hardcores know. But my knowledge is definitely more limited. So, but as far as I know, I think DC had their stuff like. I think they had like live action stuff before Marvel. Long before Marvel. I'm pretty sure.
And I'm pretty sure DC also had their comics out before Marvel in some respects.
Well, it's a tricky thing because technically what we know is as DC Comics is actually Marvel, as far as I know, is just one company.
Mm-hmm.
DC is like 7 companies. Detective Comics was around before Batman, obviously. He came in, and I forget which issue he first showed up in, which is probably one thing that a Batman fanboy should know, but I'm also half retarded. So my point is that we're talking since
Action Comics.
Yeah, we're talking like since like before. I think before 1920, the company that was going to be DC Comics was around. They were originally some other company, then they got bought out, then they merged, and then they got bought out again, then they became DC Comics. Marvel started putting stuff out in like the mid 30s, but they didn't really start making a big name for themselves until, like most comic things, World War II. Because who did they give us in World War II? DC was like, okay, we'll have Wonder Woman fight the Nazis. We'll have Superman fight the Nazis. Disneyland is like, we'll have Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck fight the Nazis. And Marvel's
put in like these really weird like propaganda messages into our cartoons.
And then Marvel was like, oh, damn it. We don't really have like a real super noteworthy hero. We're going to have to create one. And someone's like, I got it. Captain America, who literally was the first. Yes, that subtitle in that movie is correct. He's quite literally the first Avenger in every sense of the word. Even though I don't think he was on the first Avengers team, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The original Avengers team was like Ant-Man, Black Panther. I can't remember the other ones.
Now, speaking of Black Panther, I actually just saw the fact that Jack Kirby's editors at one point wanted him to put more white people into Black Panther. So the very next comment was Black Panther beating up the KKK. Yeah, I remember reading about that somewhere, and I'm just like, dude, what a rebel. Nowadays, we hear something like that, and we're like, man, that's cool. Back then, that could have probably gotten him fired. Anyway, the point I was trying to make about the live-action stuff was that now, Batman is one of the most marketed characters of all time. And when people get into, like, great, who's the best comic book character of all time debates, you always hear them bring up, like, nowadays they bring up Iron Man, but they bring up Superman, they bring up Wolverine. But realistically, to me, the great battle of who's the best comic book character, if we're going by merchandise and media, it's always really been Batman versus Spider-Man. And I could go into the various things they have in common and what actually makes them great opposites yet similars, but that would literally be an entire hour video in itself. And all I'm going to say is that so when we were kids, the cartoons were doing great, but there wasn't really a great video game, and there wasn't a great movie at that point, because at that point, all we had was the cartoons. The comics weren't, in the 2000s, DC was going through some weird stuff, because when we were growing up, so for me, when I started watching the anime series, I got my TV in 99 or whatever, so from about 99 to about 2001 or 2 or whatever, that was when DC was, they weren't restructuring themselves, but they were, trying to, like, gear their stuff towards the 21st century. The Teen Titans were going through a bunch of stuff. Darkseid was making a whole bunch of plays, and it would eventually lead to, Countdown to 52, then 52, and then like 1 year later and all that, and then eventually Flashpoint, and
New 52, which up until New 52, they had more or less a consistent-ish plan for like 8 years. And when the cartoons had finally wrapped up, because I forget when Justice League and Batman Beyond Unlimited and Batman Beyond wrapped up, but around the time those had finished coming out, those were done, Batman Begins had hit theater, and everyone was like, "Oh, damn!" And then, The Dark Knight comes out in theaters, and everyone's like, "Oh man!" I think it's the same year or the year before Arkham Asylum comes out on the PS3, and we like, "Oh man!"
And then, funnily enough, Iron Man came out the same year as The Dark Knight, but they could be so diametrically opposite of film. Because think about it. Here's the thing, and kind of going into the movies a little bit here. The thing I want to mention is that when it comes to DC and Marvel in terms of their movies, DC has had kind of some ups and downs, some hills, peaks and valleys, and they've had that pretty consistently throughout their movie making career. You had the Christopher Reeves Batman or the Christopher Reeves Superman that was really good. You had the Tim Burton Batman movies that were really good, and then you had some duds like Superman 4 Superman 4 The Quest for Peace.
Quest for Peace.
You had Batman and Robin, but then you also had really good ones later coming out, like let's say the Dark Knight trilogy, and then you kind of have some falter with some of the DCEU. Here's the thing with Marvel. They had the same sort of track record. They had some good stuff originally, like the originals, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
Yeah, that's what I was
You had, but then you also had some pretty bad duds, like almost every single fucking X-Men movie that Fox ever made.
I have a flow chart.
And now
for these X-Men movies, it literally goes after the first two, because those two people pretty consistently say they liked. Literally after that, it literally goes bad movie, then good movie, then bad movie, then good movie. Literally every time. It's really funny to me.
And here's the thing. Up until that point, when Disney bought them out, again, like I was saying, they had a similar track record to DC, where it was good movies and bad movies. But once Disney bought them out, I think that gave them the ability to start making hit after hit after hit after hit after hit.
Well, they had Disney's marketing and Disney's money.
And the same thing, the thing I feel that is making DC having trouble with their DCEU. Now, it is getting a whole lot better. Wonder Woman was really good. Shazam was fucking fantastic.
Oh, did you see Shazam?
I haven't yet, but I hear it's one of the best of the DCEU.
Yeah, it's sick.
Now, it took a while to get there. It took a couple bumps, namely, Zack Snyder from Man of Steel, the Justice League, and we could talk about that in a few minutes. But I want to say that DC, for the most part, has had Warner Brothers on their side for a couple decades longer than Marvel had with Disney.
Yeah.
And so I feel that part of it has to do with corporate oversight with Warner Brothers in order to make these films not really all that good in quality, but still profitable.
Oh, trust me. As I followed all that backstage crap with the DCU, I will fully get to that, because trust me, I believe in playing defense for stuff I like, but I think it's every fan's almost duty to hold something's feet to the fire if they believe there's a misstep. Now, what I mean is, I don't mean like those those internet, like, not internet, some of those bigger YouTubers, you know, they'll get a couple 100,000 views per video, a couple million even maybe for their film analysis, and they act like they're speaking for like a whole audience or a whole couple audiences. No, because whole thing, I'm just saying, speak for yourself is what I'm getting at. And it's funny you mentioned the Sam Raimi stuff, because that's what I was going to get into next. So when we were growing up, at that point, I don't want to say DC really only had the cartoons before Batman Begins, but they almost did, because there wasn't any great DC movie out. I mean, there wasn't any sweet video game, you know. Marvel, on the other hand, up until the Arkham games came out, I would argue that Marvel had, like, at least I played more Marvel video games than I had Marvel comics, and I subscribed to Marvel comics for some years, but you know, when I was a kid, you had like those two Spider-Man games on the pretty much every Spider-Man game up until Spider-Man 3 was really good. I mean, the first two on the PlayStation, Ultimate Spider-Man, a lot of people feel like Spider-Man 2 is like the best Spider-Man game until the one on PS4, which I've still yet to play. But I really liked Ultimate Spider-Man. That was my favorite Spider-Man game.
Absolutely. I thought Ultimate Spider-Man was a lot of fun. The voice actor, who was only 13 at the time of recording it, just did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, that was Max from Foster's Home.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
One thing that I found really interesting about Ultimate Spider-Man as well is that unlike Spider-Man 2, instead of having to follow just a bit of a rogues gallery from Spider-Man and kind of follow the plot of the movie very loosely, Ultimate Spider-Man was born with the heart of the comics in mind. I mean, if you look at the cutscenes, it's all panels and everything like that. Now, they were also able to bring in other Marvel properties. Like, you get to race Johnny Storm.
You race Johnny Storm. Venom gets in a bar fight with Wolverine for no reason.
Yeah.
You know? The point I was going to get to was that you also had the X-Men cartoons and video games. Now, there were two X-Men cartoons when I was out. There was like the cheesy Fox one, which I kind of remember, but it was the one that aired on Cartoon Network all the time.
The one that was
yeah. And then on top of that, you also had you had the X-Men Legend games, which led into the Marvel vs. Capcom games, which were, I think, very, very good. But then the Spider-Man, every other game, as far as I'm concerned, after Arkham and Marvel pretty much sucked. The only exception I feel was like there was that one Punisher game on the PS2 that I thought was really good, or at least it was fun. And then there was also the whatchamacallit, come on, think. Damn it, I can't remember. But my point is that the Spider-Man games were still pretty good, but except for a couple, they all kind of just faltered. And then after Arkham came out, DC was like, "Well, we don't need to ever need to make any other video games in the DC universe again. Let's just double down on these Batman games." And they churned out 4 blockbuster games like it was nothing. So you had all that.
You're also wanting to talk about, when it comes on the Marvel side of things, the OG Spider-Man game for PS1.
Yeah, I mentioned that. That was a great game.
Oh yeah, especially with the fact that, you know, an entire third of the game is solely based with levels getting to Venom.
Oh yeah, where you're chasing him through the city and then you're in the sewer and stuff. That was good.
Oh yeah. I smell bad symbiote, and it ain't me.
So that was the world we'd grown up in. And for the most part, because that first Iron Man movie did really good in the box office and ratings and everything. But it was opposite The Dark Knight. Now, and I swear to God, this is exactly how this shit went down. Incredible Hulk was forgotten about.
Mhm.
Captain America, everyone at the time was like, Iron Man 2. Everyone was like,
At least it brought us Black Widow.
and then after that, what was the next movie after Iron Man
Thor.
2? Thor. And then Thor, everyone was like, what?
The
And
director was literally someone who directed Shakespeare. I think it was kind of difficult to get an audience for that.
wait, what? I didn't hear about that.
Yes, the director of the first Thor movie directed Shakespeare plays. So
Who
that's
the
why
hell-
it sounds all Victorian and shit in the first movie.
And then after that is the first Avengers movie, yeah?
Yes, correct.
Okay. When that movie came out, everything was different. After that movie, the critics couldn't suck off these Marvel movies hard enough. They still gave Thor: The Dark World some shit. But other than that, I mean, it helps that Guardians of the Galaxy was great. But Guardians of the Galaxy, boom! Some people thought they were cooler than the Avengers. I know I did. You had a Winter Soldier. Everyone was like, boom! That was okay. It helps that was actually better than the original. Then
Now, I will say, I actually have a story to talk about with Winter Soldier, but I want to get to Guardians real quick. I feel Marvel was on a high when they got off the hype train of the Avengers, because there were people that have been waiting, like 25, 30 years to see Avengers on the big screen. And of course, it didn't make things any worse that, Joss freaking Whedon was the one directing it. And he is one of the most visual storytelling directors I have ever seen, outside of people like maybe Guillermo del Toro and those kind of directors. But I felt like they were riding on a high, so they're like, all right, let's throw a talking raccoon into the mix and see if people like it. And it turned out to be a hit. Then
it helps that Rocket was voiced by Bradley Cooper, who oozes charisma.
And even better, they have that end credits scene where it's Howard the freaking Duck, and they'll be like, yeah, if you want us to rectify the Lucas fueled shitstorm from the original Howard the Duck, we can do that. Now, getting to Winter Soldier and my story. I saw the first Avenger, and I was like, that was incredibly underwhelming. I get that it was a World War II drama. And I liked that they were able to keep the aesthetic going really well. But I felt the ending was very anticlimactic. And it was kind of like, okay. And then a friend of mine said, go see Winter Soldier. And I was like, no, I didn't really like the first movie. And he's like, no, it's better than the first movie. It's better than the Avengers. And I'm like, okay, Avengers is good. But I don't think that it's going to be as good as that. And then there was an individual that I still watch to this day, although with all his political bullshit, I'm not so sure anymore, Movie Bob. He basically said, imagine the Winter Soldier as being Captain America thrust into a spy thriller. When I heard that, I'm like, okay, now you have me on board. I saw it the last week it was in theaters. And my God, I went onto Facebook that night and I'm just like, I have not had this much fun with a superhero movie since The Dark Knight. It was that good. And still, to this day, it is my favorite of the MCU.
So then you move on from that. And then you got And trust me, people, I'm going to get to the DC movies. I think I've already, chronologically, passed. What's it called? Man of Steel. But let me talk about this next movie, and then I will get to Man of Steel.
Sure.
Then you have Age of Ultron. Now, I'm going to tell you something. When I watched that trailer, the first one, and it was the one where, you know, it's all dark and sinister, you find out that James Spader is voicing Ultron, and he's singing the "I've Got No Strings on Me" song from Pinocchio. It's dark and creepy. I'm like, ooh! I watched that trailer like 27 times. It was so epic. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about my feelings when I saw that movie trailer, because Ultron is the shit. And I thought to myself, okay, and this was back then. I was thinking like, okay, Marvel's at a point right now where almost anything they do is going to be iconic. And for a lot of people, this is going to be their first time experiencing any of these characters. And all the comics are going to be written to reflect these changes and readapt them. Of course, this was about 2 years or a year before they made Thor a woman, and then they race lifted all their old characters. But that's another issue entirely. There's like a bunch of YouTubers who talk about that on the regular. So and I'm like, this is going to be people's first impression of Ultron, and this is going to be like a career reimagining for James Spader. This is going to be great. And I saw the movie, and I was so let down. I don't
completely agree with you.
And trust me, people get on DC. Marvel has its fair share of backstage problems too. And half the reason we even hear about it is because Joss Whedon is a man that will not be silenced, okay? He was very vocal about it. And how he battled with the executives to keep some of these scenes and whatever. And look, I'm going to be honest with you, okay? You can only blame studio executives so much. There's a point where sometimes it's just the writing. I did not like how they wrote Ultron. I've never been a fan of Scarlet Witch. Vision is cool, but useless. They brought Quicksilver in just to show that they could do it.
And then they
killed him just to show that they could do it. And I was like, and then they started doing the weird romance between Black Widow and Bruce Banner, which I was like,
well,
okay.
That came out of nowhere.
But then they dropped it in all the regular movies like it never happened. And I'm like,
except for that one little scene in Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, right.
Here's the thing. I enjoyed David Spader's performance as Ultron. He tried his best to make those lines
His acting was great.
His charisma in that role. But I do agree with you. I saw it in theaters and I promptly forgot about it. I've seen it once and I still have not seen it again.
And that's Ultron. He's not a villain that is just to be mildly trifled with. He's a big deal.
I mean, hell, the movie itself is called Age of Ultron. It should have been over a course of years, like they kind of did with Endgame, where it was like a 5-year jump. They could have done something like that.
Oh, yeah. No, you're completely right. Or at the very least, I was hoping he'd at least live so that, you know, I don't know, because clearly they were building up to Thanos, and at the time, nothing would have gotten my dick harder than the idea of Ultron, voiced by James Spader, teaming up with Thanos. That would have been great. We'll keep Red Skull alive and have him be one of the Guardian Bros on the moon. But, you want Ultron to be a good written character?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that movie. It's just disappointing because it had so much going for it.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's jump back. Let's talk about let's talk about the first entry in the DCU. First off, I need to say something about the DCU. Arrow is a show that had a lot of problems. But what didn't help was if DC had a character that they wanted to show up in the DCU, and Arrow already had them on show, they would either have them write them off or kill them, because they didn't want two versions of the same character around, because they're like, wait, we can't have a Deathstroke on the CW and a Deathstroke in these movies. That'd be ridiculous. We could have two Barry Allens, but they're going to be different actors with completely different stories. And it's like, huh? But that actually has very little to do with Man of Steel. Okay. Now, it's hard to talk about Man of Steel without talking about Batman v Superman and Justice League. All I can tell you is that, from my personal opinion, I truly believe that Zack Snyder conceived these movies as a trilogy.
Mm.
And I truly, truly believe that it was meant to start out bleak and end with hope. Because if you were to watch Man of Steel, BVS, and then JL back to back, you would see a clear, consistent theme with the characters and the writings and that. But unfortunately, it didn't. I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky because it'd be easy to write off people that didn't like these movies as people that don't like, deep written superhero characters. But unfortunately, DC's always been in a weird spot because they're like, oh, you guys are too dark and moody. You guys need to be more bright and hopeful. And the thing is, DC is. But, and I've always said this, I think they specialize better with the dark shit. And with Superman and Man of Steel, it was meant to be like this alternate take, like this. He came off as angsty and brooding. I feel like he was meant to come off more as conflicted and thoughtful, philosophical Superman. But there were two problems. Number one, look, I love Zack Snyder. I legitimately do. I like
he's made some really good movies. Like
I like
300 was phenomenal.
I like his cinematography,
Mm-hmm.
and I like a lot of his. I like a lot of his directing techniques,
Mm-hmm.
but his writing extremely hit or miss. And unfortunately, the two big problems with Man of Steel's writing is that it's very thought provoking and it's very dark and deconstruction-y. Unfortunately, it was written in a way to where it doesn't, to me, come off as, thought-provoking or whatever. To me, it almost comes off as full of itself and pretentious. And the second thing is that, look, there's a way to do dark and broody, okay? And then there's a way that's dark and broody that is a lot like Batman. And when I watch Man of Steel, just like when I watch Arrow, it looks like, okay, I see a production crew that really wanted to make a Batman movie, but they had to make a Superman movie. And they're like, well, Batman still sells, so let's make Superman dark and broody like Batman, which is a problem. That works for Batman because it goes with everything about him. You can have Superman be dark, broody, and thought-provoking, but there's different psychologies around it. And then the whole thing with Pa Kent and the stuff with Superman and Zod and that family. I like the concept of Superman hating himself for having to kill someone, but the whole scenario could have been written better. This part I think is stupid, though. The people are like, oh, so much destruction's caused in these DC movies. I'm like, boy, do you not watch these Avengers movies? There's so much collateral damage in these movies that in Civil War, it's part of the plot. They're literally like, look, bruh, you guys have caused way too much damage in these movies. You need to go away. I mean, no one brings that up even before Civil War came out, but whatever. Anyway, Man of Steel, it was a rocky start. And everyone thought, there were two thoughts, because everyone was like, DC was like, okay, this is going to be the start of our cinematic universe. And everyone's like, oh, cool. And then they saw the movie and they're like, is the Dark Knight trilogy canon? And they're like, no. And then they're like, the fans were like, I mean, granted, it wouldn't have worked because the Batman movies are so grounded in reality that they're not even comic book movies. They're just movies that happen to star characters that are named after comic book characters. But Man of Steel is legitimately the one movie out of this whole DCU thing where I'm like, you know what? You guys can say whatever you want about it, trash it, because it had very little interference, and it had the least production problems out of anything. So realistically, it just should have been better. People can say whatever they want about it. I don't care. But yeah, it's so far in the timeline. The Arkham games are out, but at the timeline, it's not a good first step for the DCU overall. It had some good ideas, but couldn't fully commit to them.
Now, what I'm going to talk about here when it comes to what you were talking about with Man of Steel and BVS. Now, I'll let you get to BVS in a minute, but I just want to say,
yeah, there's like three or four Marvel movies in between it because DC waited like 4 years.
Now, here's the thing. I do agree with you. Man of Steel could have been so much better. And here's the thing. I feel like Zack Snyder was doing everything he possibly could to say, hey, to kind of like tap you on the shoulder pretentiously and be like, hey, this isn't your father's Superman. It's not your father's Superman anymore. And then with BVS, they're just like, okay, let's take a Frank Miller comic and let's take the middle of the 90s craze of let's just do the craziest shit we can think of with a rogue that has never been seen in a Superman comic before and have that character beat Superman to a pulp and kill him. And let's smash those two together and see what comes out. And then have the garbage fire that is BVS.
Yeah, it's I'll get into BVS when we get there. But like I said, it's retroactively really hard to talk about Man of Steel without talking about the other ones, because like every standalone Marvel movie you could talk about it by itself, because like the DC movies now, they're all very self-contained with hints of the overarching world. I will say one thing though. I've always felt that with these DC movies, because this is technically a debate podcast, so might as well throw a little debation on here. I've always felt that DC, maybe too much, but DC is a lot better at giving their characters, holding their superheroes accountable for their own actions, because like Civil War and BVS, Superman's held accountable for all the damage that was caused in his fight against Zod, but Batman in that movie goes through character changes that are shown in Justice League and stuff, and in all the other movies, it's not like, oh, I made this mistake, but we're going to forget about it next scene or whatever. They learn and evolve, and I think they carry over their stuff into their movies more. My biggest point of contention with the MCU was always Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. I know it's trust me, it's great, it's iconic, but at the same time, I felt like Tony Stark learned the same lesson. It's kind of like people's opinions on Fluttershy. It's like he learned the same lessons over and over and over again. But to me, instead, where Fluttershy, she learned similar lessons, but she overall progressed as a character. It felt like at the end of every movie, except for Endgame, it was like a reset button on Tony Stark, and he felt like the same character he was when the movie started. Mm-hmm. When the last movie started, and I don't know, that's always been, and that's just one example. I feel like these MCU characters, with the exception of like the Guardians crew and Black Panther, if we're talking just the movies, are very static characters. And I genuinely feel like the DC comic book characters in their movies have have grown and evolved and developed more. Now, whether people like it or not, of course, point of contention, but that's my 2 cents on that. But anyway, so what was the next Marvel movie after Age of Ultron?
After Age of Ultron, we had Ant-Man, Civil War, Doctor Strange, Thor Ragnarok, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Black Panther up to Infinity War. So, Ant-Man, I have only seen bits and pieces of it. But I do definitely want to talk about Doctor Strange and Civil War. Because with Doctor Strange, I thought the visuals themselves were cool. Looking at Civil War, like you were saying, with the Sokovia Accords being a main plot point of the movie, but also having, well, Bucky still being on the run, and that whole side plot of did Bucky, while being brainwashed, kill Ma and Pa Stark? And
That's right.
That was
I forgot about that.
And having Zemo kind of in there in the background. I felt like Civil War was actually a really good follow-up to Winter Soldier. And had some really good moments to it. And again, certainly better than Age of Ultron when it came to kind of like an Avengers-like movie.
I'm going to tell you the best things about this movie in an order that I think everyone can agree with, of the best things in this movie. Black Panther, Spider-Man, the fights, and then Ant-Man.
Yep.
Because I knew they weren't going to skimp on Black Panther. I knew that they were going to come in hot with Black Panther because they had to, really. I mean, he's one of the most he's one of the founding members and one of Marvel's oldest and favorite comic book characters, actually, but mostly forgotten about for one reason or another. Luke Cage is a little more remembered than Black Panther before this movie. But Black Panther, when he put on that suit and he had his powers, and he was Black Panthering, he was running down the highway fighting those helicopters.
And he was extremely cat-like in his moves as well.
Yeah, it was that was some good shit. It was so good, I was like, man, why didn't they bring him in earlier?
Yeah. Now,
you know?
What I find interesting is the fact that this is where we can get another point of contention. This came out the same year as Batman v Superman.
Oh, are we
both
going there?
team-up movies, and both movies that heroes are fighting each other. And obviously we know which one was the better one, but I do think that with BVS, there was a lot more studio interference that caused the movie not to be as good as it should have been.
Now, Batman v Superman had finished filming quite long before it actually came out. I think that's obvious. The movie came out in 2016. I think that it probably finished filming in like 2015, 14 maybe even, but they decided to hold back on it. And I'm not sure why. I mean, probably because they were like, oh, let's release some movies in a stream of consciousness, because like, what was it, 5 or 6 months after that, they released Suicide Squad. But then after that, the next year, they've got Wonder Woman. And I think Justice League was the same year.
Yep.
Yeah. And then after that, of course, was in Aquaman and Shazam. So they were like, okay, there's a lot of time in between some of these movies. So let's try and put some of these together, maximize some profits. So you can't really see the production problems in Batman v Superman as much, but there's two ways of watching this movie and 3 opinions on it. Number 1, you watch the first version and you either liked it or don't like it. Number 2, you watch the extended version after watching or without ever watching the cut version. And then you wonder, holy hell, why did they release the theatrical cut as it was? Because they cut out plot points and characters and motivations and arcs. And Zack Snyder needs to be allowed to make movies, his long-ass movies, okay? Because Batman v Superman as a 3-hour movie would have been so much better as its 2.5-hour version. It was... I mean, if you didn't like it in the first cut, you might not have liked the extended cut, but you would agree. Everyone would agree it was better. It was so much better. And again, this is where it comes down to being like,
You there?
because it's doing something different with the characters while also playing up familiar scenes and moments from other comic books, like the Frank Miller one you mentioned. And to me, I feel like it helps to have comic knowledge for some of these DC movies because they do play on that stuff. Whereas with the MCU movies, they're essentially reimagined characters almost entirely. But the DC movies still play on the mythologies of their other characters. But that creates a problem because you got Zack Snyder, Batman, killing people for what I assume was meant to be shock value. I think the idea was that here's a Batman that's lost his way. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, here's my thing. They never really brought it up in the movie, though. He just killed the dudes, and no one thought about it. And it's like, it just came off as, even to this day, that's like the thing I hold the most contention over. And I get it, trust me, there's been millions of videos of people talking like, well, Batman's killed before, well, Batman's let so-and-so die, well, Batman's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, here's what I'm getting at. The point is, did Batman murder someone in cold blood? Did he attack an enemy knowing full well that they will die? That is what I mean by Batman killing, me not liking Batman killing someone. Because if we're talking intentionally, he hasn't done that since, like, what, the last few days of Detective Comics, unless it's some Elseworld thing. But he never intentionally kills anyone. I mean, there's kind of an optional thing you can do in Arkham Knight, but whatever. That's a video game. You know, that's my thing. The only other thing I really want to defend is the Martha scene. Because, look, the idea was it wasn't that Batman had, freaked out because simply they shared the same name. The symbolism behind it was that, Batman had lost so much of his humanity with killing the criminals and trying to kill Superman. And the idea was that here's Superman, this alien. He has like a mother, and it's that like simple, like I don't want to say Freudian, but it's that psychological connecting of the dots there.
That it was showing that Superman was more human than Batman realized.
Yeah, and Batman even says in like the funeral for Superman, he's like he says in Justice League, he's like he's more human than I ever was, and that's the key to that scene. Unfortunately, it wasn't conveyed properly, so everyone was just like, what? Their moms share the same names? That's stupid and contrived.
Yeah,
and
I do agree.
I will say it is contrived, but to me, that could have been for me, it was a powerful scene because I got it because, there's only so many spins you can put on Batman and Superman to where you realize where they're going and you can understand these things. But, I feel like it could have been conveyed more because I had to think about it, and it's one of those things where you should be able to watch it and instantly
understand it right away. It was conveyed very poorly.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. It's not like it's not like a plot twist in a movie where you need to go back and rewatch to notice all the foreshadowing and stuff. It's more like you should be able to watch it and instantly understand and be like, oh, you know. But those are my only few real big things about the movie. I don't really have anything else to say. Oh, Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. I actually liked it because I thought it was a unique take on the character.
I like how it was kind of a newer sort of Silicon Valley sort of Lex Luthor.
Yeah, it's literally like if Mark Zuckerberg was a bad guy.
Exactly.
And yet Andy Samberg who played him. So, you know, it's a win-win, I think. Yeah. I genuinely like his Lex Luthor. Doomsday, yeah, Doomsday kind of bites. But Wonder Woman was cool in that movie.
Wonder Woman was a good movie. Shazam was really good. Now, one thing that I want to talk about with Justice League is the fact that Zack Snyder went through a tragedy. I totally get that.
Right, his daughter.
But the fact that Warner Brothers decided to, hey, let's bring in Joss Whedon, who has a completely different style and tone, to finish the movie and do reshoots. It was a mess because of it.
Oh, you triggered it. Oh, it ain't stopping. Here, it's coming. It pisses me off. And then you have Wee Wee on social media disowning the movie and not even trying to like add like context or whatever to why things were the way they were. Because look, that movie should have been like 3 hours, at least 2.5. But Warner Brothers made them trim it down to 1 hour 59 minutes because of profitability or something. I don't fucking know. And you had that, and Whedon added in all this new stuff and these new scenes to which you could tell because they're his sense of humor and writing. He had this stuff with this Russian family throughout, and oh my god, it was just reshoot after reshoot after bullcrap after bullcrap. It's a chore, and Warner Brothers is never going to release the Zack Snyder cut. I don't know why, but fans want it. Even people that didn't like that Justice League movie, they want it because, like I said, everyone now realizes there was a consistent story throughout those 3 films. And if Whedon's is inferior, or at least his additions, you know? And look, Zack Snyder's version probably wouldn't save, Steppenwolf from being a lackluster. I thought he was a fine villain, at least in the sense of, here's a black and white bad guy. They need to stop him. I like simple stuff like that once in a while. I mean, sure, I can watch complex stuff and theorize about it. I like me some Metal Gear and Evangelion, but sometimes I just want some Crash Bandicoot or Mario Brothers. Point A, point B, and then jump on some stuff and break some boxes. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it was just a mess. Everything about it was a mess. Nothing's been the same after that. They can't make this Flash movie to save their goddamn life. Ben Affleck isn't Batman, but he would be Batman again if they made another Justice League movie, because that's what he's on contract for. Henry Cavill is either Superman one week or not Superman another, or blah blah blah. The only consistent things that have come out of Justice League is Wonder Woman and Aquaman. And it's just, it all takes place in the same world, and I'm sure they'll do team-up movies again one day in the future. But for now, they're just like, yeah, we'll release 1 or 2 movies a year, and we're going to put a focus on single-player campaigns and artistic directorial integrity. And I'm like, oh, great! Unfortunately, I wanted to see the Doomsday stuff, not the Doomsday. I wanted to see the dark sided stuff expanded upon. I wanted them to bring in like Apocalypse and the New Gods and all that. And they may still do that, but yeah, that's all I have to say about Justice League. Because I can watch it. It's easy watching. I like watching it, but It could have been so much more, so much better. And for some, that's the thing that just had people writing off DC as a lost cause as far as movie goes for pretty much the foreseeable future, which really sucks because at that point, the Dark Knight trilogy was Dark Knight, that movie, it was only like 6 years old, 7 years old. And it's just like, what a shift.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I want to ask you before we go back to Marvel and kind of with the Infinity War and whatnot and Endgame, do you think that they're going to do a Flashpoint movie since there's been some shit with the DCEU? You know, also considering that
I'm glad you brought that up.
Robert Pattinson is going to be the new Batman.
Well, okay, I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually interesting. So Robert Pattinson got cast as Batman, but it's still in the DCU, but it's a prequel movie. It's it's a prequel movie.
So a prequel to the Ben Affleck Batman.
I don't want to make any predictions. This is just speculation. I theorize they could maybe be doing a Red Hood movie or at least the Death of the Family movie where Joker kills Jason Todd, because in BVS there's a shot of what was Jason Todd's Robin armor with the ha 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 written over it, which is what Joker wrote on it when he killed Jason Todd. Mm-hmm. Now the Flash thing, there have been talks it could be a Flashpoint movie. There's been talks it is a Flashpoint movie. I don't know. I just know it keeps changing directors and writers like every other couple of months. Oh shit! You know what I forgot? I forgot to talk about Suicide Squad. Look, basically, all I'm gonna tell you is that this movie is everything wrong with DCU in 2 simple points: reshoots and bad editing. The writing was here. The writing was hit and miss. I admit. But you could tell that the movie had an original idea, and more so than JL, you could tell where the reshoots were. You could tell where the rewrites and the redubs were, and it was just ew at times.
And there were also points like, because I did see Suicide Squad, I will say that I think they were trying really hard to make these characters really good and give them depth and everything. But unfortunately, again, with the corporate meddling and the reshoots and all that, it kind of fell flat on its face.
And they had a trailer editing company edit the movie for some reason.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Marvel.
Yeah. Now let's talk about Infinity War and Endgame.
Okay. Infinity War? It's great! Endgame? It's fitting. There's a couple of points of contention I have with Endgame, but I'll get there when we get there. You can walk us through it.
Okay. One thing I loved about Infinity War was the fact that they put Thanos as the main character and following him around instead of just the Avengers. Because I feel like if they had done more of that with Age of Ultron, they could have actually made a better movie. But I gotta say, with Endgame, when I saw it, it felt like they were doing 2 things. It felt like the first half of the movie, when it's the 5-year time jump and they figure out about time travel and they're able to go get the Infinity Stones.
And Thor is fat playing Fortnite.
Mm-hmm. New Bat. There is this picture that I saw where it's the black dude sweating, and it's like, hey dude, you hear all that thunder outside? And it's New Bastard 69. Yeah. But I will say, Endgame, when they started doing the time travel stuff, it felt like they were basically doing a love letter to their own, to basically a love letter to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then...
Thanks for all the money!
And then the second part was with them throwing as much crap as they possibly could onto the screen and making it work.
Did it ever feel a little bloated at times to you?
Oh
Or-
yeah, like when everyone came out onto the battlefield. Yeah, that did feel very bloated. And I'll say this: I have not seen Captain Marvel yet. I'm waiting for the Disney Plus streaming service to watch it. But I didn't
It's
like her.
okay.
I didn't like her in Endgame. I really didn't. She felt like she was written just like how Brie Larson is talking. I'm better than everyone else, and you wouldn't have won. You would have won if I was here. Blah blah blah.
You know what? To give her credit, she was better in Captain Marvel. That movie, in a nutshell, it's weird. It feels rushed, and almost everyone feels more developed. Everyone almost feels more developed than Captain Marvel. But I will give them this. They did give Captain Marvel. Oh, excuse me. They did give her actual ups and downs and moments of conflict and weakness and anger. And I'll be real with you. Brie Larson got her ass kicked a lot in Captain Marvel. And, watching Endgame, it still feels incredibly dumbass forced and contrived that they put her in there when she was literally the second to last movie before, but whatever. She was definitely better in her own movie, but she's gonna be she's gonna be one of the faces of a Phase 4. It's pretty much gonna be her, Spider-Man, and Black Panther taking over for Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about an Endgame when Black Widow took the rip for Hawkeye? Because I have my own things about this, but I feel I'll let you go first.
I first have to say that I am a huge Black Widow fan. I love Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. She did a phenomenal job. And when they were fighting on Vormir about who was going to die, I was sitting in my seat wanting to scream, "Let it be Hawkeye, let it be Hawkeye, let it be Hawkeye." Because here's the thing. They tried to make a good character for him in Age of Ultron. But again, no one remembers Age of Ultron.
They won't give him his own solo movie. And even then, the actor that plays him was even like, yeah, I don't need a solo movie. I'm just going to show up.
He was much more underdeveloped than Black Widow.
Yes.
And when Black Widow went down, I started bawling my eyes out. I'm just like, fuck, no. Just no.
It
still pisses me off.
I had very conflicted feelings about it. When it all was said and done, Black Widow was the one that bit the dust. I was surprised, I was relieved, and confused. Now here's why. Look, not only Scarlett Johansson's performance is wooden-ish as Black Widow, but that's what they wanted for the character. And she's been around in a lot of the movies, and, there's a lot more mileage in her. And her own solo movie's coming out, and it sounds like that movie might have a hint for what's coming next. So I thought, okay, there's no way it's going to be her. And then, Hawkeye, like I said, they had no interest, basically, in giving him a solo movie. No cameo on the TV shows. He's not even getting his own show on Disney+. And the actor that plays him, he's like, yeah, I don't need my own solo movie. People like me, I'll just show up, fight the bad guys and head on. It's cool.
I mean, he's a singer, for God's sakes.
All I need to do is flex. All you need to do is smile, and the girls like me, and they'll write their fan fictions about me getting it on with Thor. And so I thought, Hawkeye in the comics has had a bit of resurgence because he had Old Man Hawkeye, and then there was another one he had, but basically he's kind of have a resurgence in the comics. So I'm like, as far as movie wise goes, he just doesn't have as much mileage, and they can't make much more money off him. So there's no way that it's going to be Black Widow. And then they kill Black Widow. And I was like, okay. I like Hawkeye a teeny bit more. Just because, at the very least, the dude's cool. His actor has his style and his charisma. And Scarlett Johansson's a very good actress. But I always liked him a little more. And when he lived, I was surprised because they probably figured that everyone thought that it was going to be him that died anyway, So, and to me, it doesn't make sense because Marvel has received a lot of criticism for taking so long to have their first female-fronted superhero movie when DCU did that as far as movie 4. And and Black Widow, her movie's been in development hell for years. Fans have actually actively wanted a Black Widow movie for years. Not Scarlet Witch, not Jessica Jones, not Pepper Potts. You get me? They wanted her, but they never gave it to them. And then her movie's coming out in a year or two or whatever. And then they just kill her in the movie. And I was like, okay. I know some people would turn this into does Marvel hate women? I'm going to ask this question. Do they just hate Black Widow?
I don't know.
I don't know, dude. She's a way more interesting character than, Captain Marvel. So, I don't know. It was so weird. I don't even know if I could say it was a con, but it was really weird. And even to this day, I'm completely perplexed by it. Mm-hmm. Now, one other thing I will say about this movie is that I'll just say two quick things because the Marvel stuff's mostly your show. All I'll say is Iron Man went out with the biggest dick in the universe. He went out like such a boss. And out of everyone, I felt like Captain America had one of the most touching and just fitting and nice feeling epilogue, eulogy, whatever things I've ever seen in a comic book thing. Because I'm like, you know what, Steve Rogers? I felt like a WWE fan, right? I was like, you deserve it. I was like, that was cool. He gets to go back. He gets to go back home to the gal he was sweet on, and live out his days through Jim Crow laws, the Beatles, and heavy metal.
And also the war in Iraq, 9/11. But I think he was just like, you know what? I'm just going to let history play itself.
And Minecraft.
Yes, Minecraft.
No, he'll be there for PewDiePie.
Now, here's what I find interesting. You were saying that Iron Man went out like a boss. Let me just say, that shoot of him holding up his finger and saying, I am Iron Man before the snap, that originally was not what was shot. They literally were trying to figure out how it was going to work. And then they were like, what about if he went and said, I am Iron Man? And they're just like, fuck, get it. Yeah, we're like 2 days for wrapping up shooting. Get them in here and get that shot.
That's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And then there's just been a deleted scene, which is probably going to date this video, but there's a deleted scene of all the Avengers kneeling before Stark. And I'm just like, God, I wish that was in the movie.
Like, thanks for all the money.
Yep. That's America's ass.
And as for now, that's the MCU for the next while. Phase 4 looks really weird. Looks really dumb and weird. But all that's left for DC right now is Aquaman, which I can just quickly summarize as Jason Momoa is a freaking bro. He's super cool. Black Manta in that movie is one of the best and accurate and coolest depictions of a comic page to screen adaptations of a character I've ever seen. He's great. Momoa's unique approach to Aquaman and the neat things they do with the narrative, and him and Ocean Master were really, really good. You know, I'd like to do a more in-depth analysis of it, but it's be here a while. And then the fight scenes at the end with the trench, and it's some of the most dopest on-screen battle war action since like the Lord of the Rings movies. It was sick. I really recommend everyone checking out the movie. And then Shazam, which was interesting because it was directed by, like Aquaman, a horror movie director, had a smaller budget, and it does take place in the DCU, but the focus is different. It's, Billy Batson. It follows the New 52 adaptation, kind of like how Aquaman's movie, it used the New 52 Jeff Johns arc, but as more as a starting field. The Shazam one, it was definitely more of a actual core of the story. Or, well, I keep saying Shazam, but his real name is Captain Marvel, but that's a long story. And Bay, to me, is great because almost more so than Aquaman, it really balances the light, balances the darkness, some real great character development and interaction, some sweet moments, couple scary moments, and some pretty sad moments. Dr. Silva is one of the coolest villains that the DCU's had. You know, it's wacky, it's unique, and yeah, it's Aquaman and Shazam and the Wonder Woman solo movie are like the three movies that DCU seems to be planning the rest of their universe around, in the sense of, okay, these three movies are they're unique. The director and film crew show their strengths. There's significantly less limiting on them. That's how we're going to do it. Which a common complaint of these Marvel movies is that they just feel churned out with the same exact, look, aesthetic, the same jokes and setups and punchlines and stuff. The only ones that feel any different is Black Panther and those Guardian movies, and probably Thor Ragnarok, and Infinity War and Endgame. DC's got some movies coming down the pipe next year that, all look pretty neat. So, honestly, the future for both looks pretty good. DC, to me, has been killing it on their DC Universe streaming service. The first season of Titans, I thought was rough a bit. There were times where some of the R-rated stuff felt gratuitous for the sake of being gratuitous. Doom Patrol was great. It was wacky, it was original, it was different, it was crazy, it was weird and abstract. I recommend everyone find either get the streaming service or pirate it. It's really a series you won't regret watching. And then Swamp Thing, it's a legit horror show set in Louisiana about Swamp Thing, and it's got if you ever see John Carpenter's The Thing? Okay, well imagine that's a 10-episode miniseries, but about Swamp Thing. It's pretty sick. So as far as TV shows wise, well, Titans, Doom Patrol, and Shazam, Wonder Woman, Swamp Thing, and Aquaman, they really show that when left to their own devices, no crap from Warner Brothers, no crappy weird input from like Jeff Johns or Dan Didio or whatever. When left to their own devices, DC can put out some baller stuff, but they've got too many things pulling them which way and loose. Marvel really only has to deal with Kevin Feige and his hatred towards X-Men but whatever.
Yeah.
Well-
And I'll say that, at least with the shows, DC has been faring much better than Marvel. I mean, you look at the Marvel shows, the main one has been Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and first 2 seasons were okay, and then season 3 hit, and it's just been downhill ever since.
Yeah, I mean, the Netflix stuff, they canceled everything, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's actually, I mean, don't get me wrong. Those shows on the CW aren't always perfect. The Arrow's had problems ever since season 2. Flash, the episodes are overall good, but the premieres are usually lackluster because there's like zero follow-up on the previous season's finale over by the end of the first episode with no lasting impact. Legends of Tomorrow's pretty neat because it's an ensemble of B and C list DC superheroes like excuse me. And that's really fun. Let me think, what else is there? There's Supergirl, which
is pretty good because it's like more of a monster of the week sort of deal.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason they use Supergirl as a thing for talking about stuff like gun control, but we won't.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I don't know who it usually is away from this stuff, but someone on Supergirl is really into social issues because they use that show for girl power and gun control-y stuff, and it's really jarring because no other DC properties like that. And then there's also there's another one. I thought there was another show. And then there's Batwoman coming out, which looks like a big fat oof.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm getting at is when DC's good, it's really good. Mm-hmm. When it's not good, it's really not good. Yeah. Now when Marvel's good, it's pretty good. When Marvel's not good, it's pretty forgettable.
Yeah.
And at the very least, I mean, people still talk about DC. No such thing as bad publicity is what I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. Sort of. I mean, obviously that's,
Yeah. So yeah, that's our talk on Marvel versus DC. We're pretty lenient on when it comes to the other, and they're much different companies. They're run a lot differently, and in all reality, there's not really one that's better over the other. I know everyone wants to just say, "Oh, Marvel because of the MCU," but they've had their bumps in the road too, just like DC. And I feel like they're both fairly competent when they want to be.
I mean, at least Warner Brothers doesn't censor people when they have negative reviews of their work.
Yep.
Because that happened.
So signing off for the Nerdcast, that's me, John.
And me, Snakeskin.
And we will talk to you guys later. Peace out.
Adios.